The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Ask Claire with Claire Elizabeth Hall. I'm Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and it is my pleasure to introduce Claire, who will introduce her guests and have a terrific show. May I present Claire Elizabeth Hall.
Thank you, Ralph Tycho, and welcome to edition number 3 of this podcast. And guest number 2, she is someone I have known for several years. I know her as a writer, a teacher, a humorist, a parent, a scholar, a fellow trans woman, and most importantly of all, a friend. And without further ado, Bethany Grace Howe. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm sitting here and I'm stunned that I would be your second guest. And in my more egotistical years, I wonder why I wasn't first. But as I get older, I'm pretty content with being number 2.
Well, only because I've known Donna, my guest last week, longer, about 30 years. So I thought Donna. No, I know that Donna would be honored doing the. Yeah.
In my life, I'm not second on anybody's list except yours. So no, I'll take it.
So, I am sitting here at home in Lincoln County, Oregon, where it's really kind of a chilly fall morning, around 46 degrees, but you, Miss Bethany, are in a part of the country which I believe your work has taken you there that is much, much warmer, correct?
Yes, I am currently in Dallas, Texas, where the temperature at the moment is 69 degrees, which I have to be honest, I think that's the coolest it's been since I got here. The first week I was here, it was in the 90s, low 100s every day. The humidity was insane. And then Friday night it started raining. And I'll tell you what, when it rains in Dallas, it comes with the component of electricity. So there's like a multitude of ways to die. And right now it's relatively cool. It's about 69 degrees, and I haven't seen the sun in 3 days, but it still gets up into the 70s, low 80s every day. So it's definitely this ain't Oregon.
No. So we've established that you're in Dallas, and how about, if you don't mind sharing with us why you're in Dallas? And I'll just say as a preface, your work as a graduate student and researcher is taking you to a lot of places, and just tell us about that work, please.
Sure. First, let me apologize. If you hear a loud roar, it's because I'm literally sitting under the landing pattern for Love Field, which is the home of Southwest Airlines. So about every 3 minutes, I can hear a 737. I'm here because my research, as you mentioned, and about a year ago, I came up with this idea that transgender people not only spend a disproportionate amount of time defending their equality, we have to actually defend our existence. In terms of, to a lot of people, we are not who we claim to be. We are liars. We are mentally disturbed, whatever our motivations might be for lying. And even among those people that empower us, sometimes there's things that happen that serve to deny your identity, like being told, if you want to be taken as a real woman, you should walk a certain way, or, if you really were a transgender man, you'd get a certain surgery or something along those lines. So my belief was that maybe the more time you had to spend doing those things and the more intensely you had to do them, the greater sense of kind of emotional anguish, I guess, that you might have. And so I did a study last winter and spring, and we discovered that, in fact, people that do report greater frequency and or intensity of identity-defining events are higher up on a negative emotional scale. And so I decided to do that study again with my researcher, Nicholas Parr, and this time in the pursuit of my doctoral dissertation. And so that's what brings me to Dallas, is we have another survey that's been running. It's had hundreds of people taking it. But I want to talk to actual people. Surveys tell you what. I want to know how, and I want to know why. And so I have come to Dallas for the purpose of interviewing 10 to a dozen people that have taken the survey so they can explain to me why they answered what they did. And I've been here about a week, and I'm here for another 5 days or so, and I'm having the time of my life.
Well, that's great. That's great to know. And let's maybe bring the threads of, and I think this is going to be really important work that changes lives and quite likely saves lives. Because, as you were speaking, I was just thinking, intuitively, it makes a lot of sense that these kind of extra burdens we carry by being trans people can be tremendously weighing emotionally, and sometimes people hear the statistic of more than 40% of trans people have considered or attempted suicide, and the negative and hateful people say, "Oh, see, that's proof that they're all crazy." No, to me that is proof that society treats them so poorly that sadly many of them at one point or another look at that as the means of escape. Or am I on the right track with that?
No, you absolutely are, and that's it's one of those things that it seems so obvious to folks like you and I, and yet, and the kind of research I do, I tell a lot of people what I do, and they're like, "Well, duh," but in the world of social science research, until it's been researched, presented, peer-reviewed, it's not the gospel, and obviously, but there was a study out a couple of years ago by a Dr. Robles and his contemporaries out of Mexico that established just that transgender people are not inherently mentally ill because they identify as transgender, that the reason that they manifest a lot of these self-destructive behaviors is, in fact, the burden placed on them by others. So to put it simply, we're not crazy. Everybody else is making us crazy.
Yeah, that's a good way to sum it up. So to bring the threads of our stories together, how long have we known each other? I'm going to say 10, 15 years when you were teaching here in Lincoln County, and maybe even before that, columnist for the local newspapers.
Yeah, I in fact kind of took your old job. I don't know that I was the one right after you, but I arrived on the shores of Lincoln County in August of 2005 as a reporter for the Newport News-Times. Right.
And I had, yep. Yeah, you didn't follow directly because I did that detour into radio, but wow.
Right. But no, my editor at the time said, "Oh, you got to meet this person. You got to meet them. You're going to love them." And so, you were one of those people I kind of looked forward to talking to, and I remember meeting you in your office there in the county building there in Lincoln County.
Yep.
And so after that, I went back to teaching, but we stayed in touch. I wrote a column for the newspaper for years. So Lincoln County was my heart and soul for about a decade, and I remember obviously you were a big part of that.
Well, thank you. And as Ralph and I talked on the very first edition of this program, and I know it's going to be a recurring theme throughout my own story, my own journey, and after a lifetime of struggling and soul searching, I made the decision last December that I would be publicly transitioning, and one of the first things my therapist said, and then as I started sharing with an intimate group of friends, saying, "Oh, gee, it will be really helpful and important to you if you can reach out to and make friends with at least one person who's already been along this path." And I immediately told them all. I said, well, I consider myself an exceptionally fortunate person for reasons too many to count, but one of them is that I know not one, but two women who have done this. My guest, Donna, last week, who is now about 15 years into living her truth, And then your date, test my memory here, but I'm thinking very beginning of the year 2016.
Actually, the exact beginning. I began living whatever you want to call it, my true life, my best life, on January 1st, 2016. I knew it would be a date that people would ask me about, and having had 7 concussions, I was like, I should pick something that's easy to remember. So I did.
And there you go. I love it. Like I meet people who sometimes, guys are usually much worse in remembering dates than women, and said, well, we got married on Christmas. And I say, why'd you pick Christmas? And, because I figured it's the one date I could never forget. But, so there you were, and as I admitted to Donna last week, I was, at first it was wow, and I am so happy for her and cheering her on from a distance, and there was that one little sliver of me saying, that lucky so-and-so, she gets to do this and I never will. But boom, 3.5 years later, here I am following along the path as well. And so, could you maybe share with folks when I first reached out to you with the news, just for counsel, advice, words of wisdom, maybe how you received that and what your thoughts were, and what are some of the good things that you shared with me?
I think what I remember is, we were sitting in that restaurant there in Eugene, and you started telling me your story, and at the time I remembered as being, you kind of saying, I think I'm going to do this, I really want to do this, but there was still sort of that, what I call the inherent asterisk in there. And as I was listening, I was kind of chuckling inside, and I didn't tell you this then. I was like, yes, I know the asterisk. I know it well. It lurks in the heart. And it's like this. It's like this thing you put there. It's like a reserve parachute or something. But just as I think I knew, and I think you knew, as I was listening to you, I was like, oh no, she knows. She's got an asterisk there, but she knows. And that's what I remember thinking. And I remember just that it made me smile a lot, because for 2 reasons. Number one, I was excited about the journey you were about to go on, but it also made me feel better, because quite frankly, when you go through this, you're always kind of wondering, God, am I weird? Is this bizarre? And then even once you decide, you're always kind of looking back and going, geez, I wonder if I should have done this differently, or was I lying to people? Was I lying to myself? And what you come to realize is, and I realized it on that day, and my research tells me this too, is that even though there's a broad spectrum of fairly similar stories about how we do this, within those are some details that are always different. And so I think it's interesting that sometimes when we're second-guessing ourselves, we focus on the things that are different, that are somehow out of alignment with what they think they should be. And yet, the more we talk to each other in retrospect, you're like, you too! And so that's what it was.
Yeah!
I was not only like, I see where you're going, but holy cow, you just gave me validation for where I've been. And so as you and I talked over that meeting in the next few weeks, a lot of it was kind of that same thing. And I saw you following, not in my footsteps, so to speak, but, most transgender people don't choose to live this sort of high profile life. And you didn't have a choice by virtue of your position in the community. I had a choice and decided not to choose that, because doing what I do at the University of Oregon has given me a platform, and I just felt like that was not a platform I could ignore. But watching you navigate a lot of these same things that I've navigated, it's made me happy, because you've navigated it a lot better than I did.
Well, that is kind. Thank you. And I just really am realizing the longer I'm on this path, the greater the importance of us helping each other along the path, helping those who are not on the path but standing alongside, often with puzzlement, curiosity, and not in a, National Enquirer, People magazine kind of curiosity, but just honest curiosity to understand this phenomenon and to be supportive as they can. That I sense that you and I both share, to a degree, I would say a sense of privilege because we've been able to do this with more resources than a lot of people have. And so, not only an obligation, but absolutely a sincere desire to do everything we can along the lines of educating and helping others.
Yeah. No, I talk about that all the time. That kind of alluded to this earlier, is that when I was given a choice. How high profile did I want to be inside of the University of Oregon and the School of Journalism and Communication? And at first it was, I don't want to be high profile at all. I want to go back. I mean, I said what I had to say because I had to say it, but I'm done. And I came to realize I didn't have that right. And as I travel around, I tell people I am the luckiest woman on the face of the earth. As well, I do a lot of, my research right now in particular is how what I call these emotions, I call them transgender identity defense-related emotions, or TIDE. So if you hear me say TIDE, that's what I mean. Is that is that as I study TIDE and as it relates to, and I'm now studying how it relates to suicidal ideation, is you start doing a lot of reading about why transgender people choose to take their life, or at least ideate it like they do and as often as they do. And now the church bells are going off. I'm sitting in the noisiest place in the world. And you start looking at all these things that happen to people, and it's like global warming or whatever, in the sense that you can't point to a storm and say, well, that was caused by global warming, but you can say, okay, here are all the different influencing factors that we are most likely sure combined to make this the storm that it was, as opposed to what it could have been. And with transgender people, it's okay, I can look at the things manifesting themselves in your life, and did one of those things cause you to engage in a suicidal behavior? No, but all of it's there. And as I started looking at all of those different causes, I absolutely could look at each one and see that where, for most transgender people, things go wrong. Things, to put it in geographic terms, maybe things veer to the right, is bad, and veering to the left is good. And everywhere along my journey, when things could have veered to the right and gone wrong, things have instead veered to the left. And I don't mean just like, oh, it could be better, but it could be worse. No, I mean it's always gone better. And when you look at that, you either decide, wow, I am an extraordinary person and I always do the right thing, or you look at that and say, I am one lucky person, and I have been blessed by the people and the institutions around me that have allowed me to do my best thing. And that's how I feel. And not everybody has that. Most transgender people don't have that. So
no, that's something I keep trying to acknowledge. And go ahead.
So so that's, as I talk to all these people this week in Dallas, I am very conscious of where things go right. And a lot of the people I talk to are very happy, transgender people leading very full and very quote-unquote typical lives. And you can see in their stories as well that things go right. And it just, there are things that for transgender people, it's like, wow, that went right for you. But for everybody else, it's like there's an expectation. Maybe not that it's always going to go right, but my goodness, it shouldn't always go wrong.
Yes. So as we talk about the combined threads of our stories, and Are you game for a little shameless celebrity name dropping? And I think you know who I'd be talking about.
You're absolutely right.
Yep,
Donald
probably.
Trump asked me. Oh, you don't mean Donald Trump? Okay, never mind. Keep going.
Sorry about that. No. In May, thanks to my friendship with you, I was able to meet a friend of yours when she and her longtime publicist came to the U of O, and I am speaking, of course, of, without a doubt, probably the most famous transgender person in the world, Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah. That's a curious relationship, and that's not a euphemism. No, 2 years ago, her publicist, a man named Alan Neroff, who's also my friend, came to the University of Oregon and just wanted to. He has a personal relationship with somebody there, and so he was in town, stopped by the School of Journalism through the workings and machinations of a friend of mine. I got to meet him, and I just said, "Look, Caitlyn Jenner's appearance on the cover of Vanity Fair changed my life." I said it was sort of what opened the Pandora's box for me that made me realize who I was, and I wanted you to know that as somebody who's helped her create her story. Her story helped create me. And he said, "Do you mind if I tell her that?" And I said, "Gosh, no." And 2 weeks later, there she was on my voicemail. And so we started talking and communicating, and it was interesting. It's always been it's a friendship that is not based on, it's based on the fact that we are both middle-aged parents who decided to transition in full view of the world. And so most of our conversation was about our kids. I mean, my daughter is still largely using crayons. She's moved up to colored pencils. I'm really excited about that. And his children are obviously some of the most famous and successful kids on the planet. But the bottom line is, you're still parents, and they're still your children. And so we talked a lot about that. And then as time went on, she became interested in my research. Like I say, I've known for a while that I was onto something, and I wanted to tell somebody that would understand it. And to be perfectly honest, I wanted to tell somebody who could help me get my message out there. As an academic, if I can let's put it this way, Caitlyn Jenner reaches more people in an hour than I could reach in a year sometimes.
Sure.
So we began talking on that level. And eventually her foundation reached out to me and said, "We'd like to hear your pitch." And so, I basically said, "Here's what I believe. Here's what I'd like to do. Here's how I think the foundation could help me." And I asked for a research grant. And then a couple of months later, she came to campus, and, we did this evening discussion. It was a private event. It was just about public relations and how she and her publicist navigated this journey in the public eye. And then at the end, they basically smiled and said, "Here's a check. Go talk to
Yeah, I love that moment because, I'm sitting there in the audience and, you're on one couch, Caitlyn and Alan are on the other couch, and you're doing kind of your Oprah thing and wrapping up the evening, thanking them for their time, thanking the audience for their participation, and Caitlyn waves and says, nope, we're not done yet, and pulls out that $10,000 check to support your further research. And I just, that was a moment. Well, I can't even imagine how it felt for you, but it felt pretty astonishing to me. I felt privileged to witness that.
Well, I'll tell you what. My first reaction was, I am in so much trouble, because that whole event was very carefully choreographed, just in terms down to timing and everything else, and it was made very clear to me there were certain things that had to happen, and there were certain, and that it was my responsibility to keep those things happening, and I'd done a great job, and right up at the end, and then all of a sudden they're like, no, hold on, and I'm like, all right, the organizing committee of this, the security department at the U of O, they're going to kill me because I have blown it at the end. And it never occurred to me. I found out later, of course, that they all knew exactly what was going to happen. I was the only one who didn't know among all the people there. So, of course, I was not in trouble in the slightest. But it was that was the first reaction was, the dean is going to kill me.
I love it.
Once
I love it.
That, yeah, it was an empowering moment, and one that I'll always remember, obviously, joyfully.
Oh, of course. So, obviously you are a friend of Caitlin, and I got the chance to meet Caitlin, and I am a great fan of Caitlin, but how about, could I ask you to play the role of advocate? You could articulate this, I'm sure, better than I can, that even within the transgender community, Caitlin does not have a lot of friends. Here's the stereotypical knock on Caitlin, and I want to hear your case for the defense. Not that she really needs one, but,
right.
She's nothing but a publicity hound. She is just focused on doing this to bring herself back into the public eye. She's got privileges that are denied to almost every other transgender person. We should, why the heck are we celebrating and following the adventures of this woman? And take it away, ma'am.
Sure.
For Caitlin.
Let's put it this way. One of the reasons our friendship works is I never presume to speak for her, and I won't now, but I can.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why our friendship is what it is because there's some similarities about who we are and what we've done. And I guess what I'll say is this, as far as the whole publicity hound thing goes, I pushed back on that fairly strongly, and I always have vehemently. And it's as simple as this, is coming out as any LGBT person knows is a terrifying experience. And I'm not going to say that coming out as transgender is worse than coming out of the closet as any other way, because it is not for me to make that decision. I can't say, I can't imagine that there's a harder version of this. And it's terrifying. Yeah. It is absolutely terrifying. And it is magnified by the fact that the size of the community that you're coming out in, how well you know that community. And so for me, even being in the most affirming place I could possibly be, I consider Eugene, Oregon at the School of Journalism about as affirming as it gets, I was still scared out of my mind. And I thought, how am I going to do this? And so I came out in a very public fashion. And it was, and I was accused of being, doing it for the attention. I mean, I had somebody say to me, look, I'll call you by the name you want me to, and I'm convinced that this isn't just a giant plea for attention. And I think what angers me the most about that is that, again, this is a terrifying experience. And when you go through this, you use every tool at your disposal to make it work and to, quite frankly, build the world you want to build. And Caitlin and I are both very similar in that we are creatures of the media. We understand it, work at it. I understand it on a scholastic level, an academic level, but she's obviously lived it. And the bottom line is that she looked at that and said, okay, this is a medium, this is a tool I know how to use. And I am going to use it. And I used it. And I make no apologies whatsoever for using everything at my disposal to make this work for me, because it scared the crap out of me. And I did what I had to do. And that's what she did. And anybody who thinks that you do this just for the attention doesn't understand this. And anyone that thinks that somebody who understands something the way she understands media, that you shouldn't use all the tools of your disposal. It's like telling a surgeon not to use a scalpel. It's like telling a soldier not to use a rifle. It is a complete lack of understanding about what it means to be on this journey. And as to the rest, I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, she's said and done some things that I wouldn't have done. And I think, but at the same time, she's said and done some things that get blown out of proportion. I mean, she wore a a red, she wore a Make America Great Again hat in her car. And, she said later, I didn't even realize that was the hat I was wearing. I just threw on something to match the outfit I was wearing in the car I was driving. And somebody I saw on social media was like, "That is the dumbest thing I ever heard. Who has a hat to match their car?" And I was sitting here thinking, well, I do. I used to drive a bright red BMW convertible, and I kept a red hat in the car just for wearing when I drove the car with the top down. I didn't wear it anywhere else. It was only in the car.
I can see that.
So,
yeah.
And then finally, I think a lot of people are angry because she's a Republican. And I understand how a lot of people are of the mind that, being a part of today's Republican Party is completely incongruous with supporting LGBT rights. But I won't lie, I can't, that's a hard connection for me to make. Having said that, some of my very best friends in the world are dyed-in-the-wool Republicans. The only thing blue about them is the Blue Life sticker on the back of their SUV. And they are my dearest friends. And I've heard people say, how can you be friends with somebody that you know is denying your rights at the polls? And I'm like, I don't know. I simply can tell you that when I've had an awful day, that when being transgender has beaten me up, when all I want to do is go home and cry on a shoulder, guess what? One of those shoulders that is always there for me to cry on is a very bright red Republican shoulder. Now, you tell me I'm supposed to just throw her out of my life, and I won't do it. And so, and again, is this a function of privilege? I think it is. I have leeway to stand here and sort of say I'm going to elevate myself above the fray because the fray has not torn me to shreds. And so I don't get angry at other people that can't do this. I don't get angry at other people that get mad at me. I mean, they're angry at me. I cannot be angry at them. But I'm friends with Caitlin the way I'm friends with lots of people, and I don't make any apologies for it. She's been very helpful to me in times, not just professionally and academically, but there have been times personally when, I was a disaster area, and she took the time out to give me a call and make me laugh when nobody else could. So,
Well, that isn't that what being a friend is all about. And from the political standpoint, just from having, read her book, watched her reality show, people, I think they have to distinguish, I hate, it almost sounds like this era's version of kind of snobbery, but or reverse snobbery when I say I've got a lot of Republican friends too, but I think Caitlin and probably many of your friends and mine, they fit into the mold of the old, what I consider classical Eisenhower Republicans. None of this social fixation, just really believers in small government, minimal regulation, and if you do that, everybody will thrive economically. And, when you grow up in upper middle class section of Southern California where your parents and everybody else has that mindset, it's not surprising that you would too.
Well, and, Caitlin has talked about this. She grew up in, I think, rural Idaho. And,
that's right.
And that part of, Idaho has always been sort of, independent, libertarian. I mean, it's, she didn't grow up in the crazy part. But But also, and again, not so much speaking for her, but just overall is, I'm not from Oregon, you are, but I've lived there for 15 years, and I'm very aware of, what they used to call Hatfield Republicans. Talk about the Endangered Species Act. Those are gone.
Sadly.
And not only do they not exist anymore, I think people have forgotten that they do. Blue Dog Democrats and Hatfield Republicans. I mean, it's like they disappeared. We don't have room for them in our discourse anymore. And I think
which is sad.
They're no longer, because they are no longer a touchstone. People no longer get to plant their flag there and find themselves increasingly pulled to the polar opposites. And it just, the culture wars are heating up, and I don't know. Like I say, I think Caitlin, there are things that I don't know if she'd do differently if she could choose or not. I know she regrets voting for the president. She said that in public. But I do think she's caught up in a time that does not allow for nuance.
Which is sad. Sad for her, sad for a lot of us. And again, how many of us, if we had a chance for a do-over on certain things in our lives, would not take that advantage? I can't think of one person who could make that claim with a straight face.
I can think of things I'd like to do over the last 48 hours. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Me too. This has been such a great conversation. I think there's been so much substance to it, but yet I think we could easily go on for another hour, but instead of that, I do know it is getting to be time to wrap up. So one of these Sundays in the months ahead, would you consider returning to Ask Claire?
I absolutely will, and I'm going to leave you with this teaser. I've been in Dallas, which is obviously Texas is as red as it gets politically.
Yep.
The people that I have met here, the support for the LGBT and the transgender community in particular here, has blown my mind. And it has completely changed the way I sort of view politics and identity politics and everything else. And so I'll leave you with that teaser to talk about next time. But just to put it in perspective, as soon as we get done, I'm going to church at the largest LGBT affirming church in terms of membership in the United States. So
in Dallas, Texas. Wow.
Dallas, Texas. So
that is fabulous.
Y'all
on that note, thank you. And thank you, Bethany Grace Howe, for a great conversation. And for Ask Claire, this is Claire Hall saying happy trails to you until we meet again.
This has been a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.